Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are really getting into it today, looking at a huge question for gender equality, which is, how do we get men involved? And not just, showing up sometimes, but really committed, reliably, for the long haul.
Yeah, sustained commitment. That's the tricky part.
Absolutely. And it feels more urgent than ever, doesn't it? You look around, you see these ongoing systemic attacks on women's rights. The source material we're using today even points to the Dobbs decision in the U.S. in 2022. A really stark example of how persistent sexist oppression still is.
It's not abstract history, it's current.
Exactly. So passive support for men, just agreeing in principle. It's clearly not enough anymore. We need active participation. Reminds me of something Bell Hooks wrote way back in 1984. She said, sexism and oppression can only really be ended if men are compelled to assume responsibility for transforming their consciousness and the consciousness of society as a whole.
That word compelled, it's strong.
It is. It suggests that initial push might be needed. But the real challenge, the one we're tackling today, is what keeps that commitment going, especially when it gets difficult or, frankly, inconvenient.
Right. We need to move past just, performing allyship. It has to be authentic. And that's precisely what the paper we're diving into is all about. It's called Men in Feminism, A Self-Determination Perspective and Goals for the Future by Moser, Siegel, and Wiley, published just this year, 2024.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is they're not just giving a list of do this, don't do that. They're looking deeper at the psychology, what actually drives sustained action.
The engine behind it all.
Exactly. So for you listening, think of this as a shortcut. We want to help you understand why it's not just about how much effort a man puts in. It's about the quality of why he's doing it. That quality, that underlying motivation, that's what predicts if someone's going to be consistent, effective, and ultimately, if they can be trusted as an ally.
Quality over quantity of motivation. Got it. Okay, let's dig in. First things first, let's make sure we're on the same page with terms. When we say feminism, what are we talking about? Let's use Bell Hooks' definition again from 2000 this time. Super clear. A movement to end sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression.
Simple, direct, action-focused.
And crucially, modern feminism has to be intersectional. We have to recognize that sexism doesn't exist in a vacuum.
Right. It connects with racism, classism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, all of it. Women's experiences aren't monolithic. Intersecting identities create really different realities of oppression.
So ending sexism means fighting all those connected systems too.
Absolutely. But before men can really internalize that big goal, they often face these. Well, the research calls them obstacles, psychological and social minefields, really.
Okay, what are these minefields?
The researchers, drawing on earlier work too, point to 4 main barriers that stop men from engaging, or at least engaging sincerely and consistently.
Let's break them down. What's the first one?
The first is maybe the most straightforward. Just plain unawareness. A lot of men are genuinely just unaware of how widespread gender inequality still is, or they don't see their own male privilege.
Because privilege is often invisible to the people who have it.
Right.
Like the fish not noticing the water.
Exactly that. If you've never had to, say, clutch your keys between your fingers walking home at night or think twice about jogging alone after dark, you might just not register that fear as a systemic gender issue. It doesn't cross your radar.
Okay, so unawareness is number one.
Yeah.
What happens if they do become aware?
Well, that's barrier number 2. The feeling that it's not their place to get involved.
Explain that.
They might recognize the problem but think this is really for women to sort out, or maybe they worry about messing up, saying the wrong thing, maybe even mansplaining.
So they hang back, even if they agree there's an issue.
Precisely. It's a kind of paralysis. That reluctance to act, even with awareness, just stalls everything.
Makes sense. Okay, number 3. You called this one a gut punch earlier, zero-sum thinking. What's that about?
Right, zero-sum thinking. It's like believing there's a fixed pie of status or resources.
Okay.
So if women gain maybe more representation in leadership, equal pay, whatever the assumption is that men must automatically lose something, women get a bigger slice, so my slice must get smaller.
Ah, the pie fallacy. Like equality is taking something away from them.
Exactly. And this anxiety seems particularly strong for men whose sense of self is really tied up in traditional ideas of masculinity. It makes gender equality feel like a direct threat, not a collective win.
So if you think like that, every step towards equality feels like a personal loss. How could you possibly invest authentically in that?
You couldn't. It creates this inherent conflict, which leads directly to the 4th barrier, social stigma.
Stigma from who?
Primarily from other men, supporting feminism, speaking out against sexism. These actions often directly violate those unspoken rules of traditional masculinity.
Like being seen as soft or weak.
Exactly. There's a real fear of social punishment, of losing status within the male group, being labeled maybe subtly or not so subtly with what one researcher called the femininity stigma that can get attached to feminist men.
Wow.
It's the fear of not measuring up, of being ostracized by your peers.
So let me get this straight. Men might fear losing status relative to women because of zero-sum thinking, and they fear losing status among other men just for engaging with feminism at all.
That's the double bind. It's powerful, and that's why just telling men do better isn't enough. We have to understand the why behind their actions or inaction.
Which brings us back to the quality of motivation.
Precisely. This is where self-determination theory, or SDT, comes in. It's a really influential psychological framework. SDT basically says motivation isn't just about how much you have, it's about the type, the quality. And it splits motivation into two broad types.
Okay, what are they?
First, you've got controlled motivation. Think of this as motivation coming from outside yourself or from internal pressure that feels like an obligation.
Give me an example.
Okay, so maybe you only speak up against a sexist comment because you know your boss is listening, or because there are strong social norms against prejudice in your immediate circle. That's external pressure.
Right, performs.
Or it could be internal pressure, like feeling guilty if you don't do something, or ashamed. You're doing it to avoid a bad feeling, not because you truly believe in it.
Like maybe sharing a feminist post online just so your friends don't call you out.
Exactly like that. And the problem with controlled motivation, it's unstable, it's fragile. If that external pressure disappears or if the cost of acting gets too high.
The behavior disappears too.
Right. That inconsistency is the hallmark of controlled motivation. It's the performative allyship we've all seen. Shows up when it's easy, vanishes when it's hard.
And that inconsistency isn't just ineffective, is it? It can actually be damaging.
Hugely damaging. When people, especially women, perceive that a man's actions are driven by these controlled motives trying to look good, avoiding guilt, they actually evaluate his efforts less positively. It feels insincere.
And it can lead to weird behaviors too, right? Like defensive helping.
Yes. That's a fascinating concept. Defensive helping is when someone, maybe feeling threatened by the idea of group equality, helps the lower status group in a way that actually reinforces the hierarchy.
How does that work?
Like helping in a way that highlights the helper's competence and the other person's dependence. Or sometimes men might engage in surface-level feminist actions specifically to deny their own privilege rather than confront it. It's help that's ultimately self-serving.
Wow. Okay, so that's unwanted counterproductive help. What's the alternative then?
The alternative and the goal is autonomous motivation.
Autonomous, meaning self-driven.
Exactly. This is when the goals of feminism aren't just things you agree with intellectually. They've become part of you. You've internalized them, integrated them into your own values, your sense of self.
So fighting sexism isn't a chore you have to do. It's an authentic expression of who you are and what you believe in.
Precisely. This is where consistency comes from. Reliability. Real growth. When your motivation is autonomous, you prioritize the actual goal ending sexism, supporting women over your own ego or defensiveness. You persist even when it's tough, even when no one's watching, even when you don't get praised for it.
That sounds like the kind of allyship we actually need.
It's the only kind that truly works long term.
Okay, this is fascinating. SDT says this internalization, this shift to autonomous motivation, only really happens when three fundamental psychological needs are met.
That's the core idea. If we want to foster this deep, reliable commitment, we need to create conditions, social interactions, environments, maybe even physical spaces that satisfy these three needs.
And those needs are?
Autonomy, relatedness, and competence. ARC.
Autonomy, relatedness, competence. Okay, let's spend the rest of our time really breaking down what each of those means and how the research suggests we can actually foster them for men engaging with feminism.
Sounds good. Let's start with autonomy.
Right, autonomy. The need to feel like you're engaging freely, that your actions align with your own values, that you're not being forced or coerced.
Exactly, because if men feel pushed or guilted or like they have to engage maybe through really poorly designed mandatory training or shaming tactics, it backfires.
That's so.
It triggers something called psychological reactance. It's that natural human tendency to push back when you feel your freedom is being threatened. Instead of internalizing the message, people resist it. They might even double down on their previous views.
So forcing it actually reduces the chance they'll identify with feminist goals.
That's what the research suggests. So the first big strategy for fostering autonomy is about ensuring men see engaging with feminism as a voluntary choice, something that aligns with their own values and even benefits them.
Okay, but how do you do that? How do you make feminism personally relevant without minimizing the focus on women's oppression?
Great question. One key way is to actively reframe feminism as a men's issue, too. Not instead of a women's issue, but in addition.
How does that work in practice?
Well, the research from a feminist and gender perspective highlights the costs of traditional masculinity for men themselves. Sticking rigidly to those old school norms, it's linked to worse mental health, worse physical health.
Like not being able to show vulnerability or resisting asking for help.
Exactly. Higher rates of depression, anxiety, risky behaviors, even higher suicide risk. So fighting sexism isn't just about liberating women, it's also about freeing men from the toxic parts of that restrictive man box.
So engaging becomes an act of self-liberation, too. It's not just doing someone else a favor.
Right, and think about structural disadvantages men face because of patriarchy.
Like what?
Parental leave is a big one. Often the structures just aren't there, or there's huge stigma preventing men from being primary caregivers, even if they want to be. It reinforces that outdated man as provider-only model.
So a man fighting for gender equality is also fighting for his own right to be a fully involved parent or partner.
Precisely. And studies show that when you frame gender equality as something that benefits both men and women, men's willingness to participate goes up significantly. It feels less like that zero-sum threat we talked about.
Okay, that reframing sounds crucial for autonomy. What else?
Another strategy is value affirmation.
Value affirmation. Tell me more.
Okay, so imagine a man hears a message about male privilege. If he feels like that message is attacking his core identity, maybe he sees himself as a good, fair person, he's likely to get defensive, shut down.
Protect his self-image.
Right. But research shows that if you give people a chance to affirm their core values before they encounter threatening information, maybe by writing briefly about something important to them, like creativity or family, totally unrelated to gender, it can buffer that threat.
Yeah.
It seems to reinforce their sense of self-worth, making them less defensive and more open to considering challenging ideas like how they might benefit from sexism without feeling like their whole identity is under attack. They can then connect feminism to those affirmed values, like fairness or equality.
Interesting. It lowers the defenses, which leads naturally to the next point, right?
Well, yeah.
The need for non-judgment and self-reflection.
Exactly, because let's be honest, learning about your own privilege, realizing you've maybe said or done sexist things without realizing it, or just understanding your role in an oppressive system, that's not easy.
It can be painful, shameful even.
Definitely. And if someone's first steps into that learning process are met with immediate hostility or harsh judgment, what's the likely reaction?
Defensiveness, walling off, not growth.
Precisely.
Right.
So the research suggests men need environments where they feel their perspectives are at least heard, where mistakes are seen as part of learning, not instant cause for condemnation. This helps reduce that shame and defensiveness.
Okay, but I have to push back here. This sounds dangerously close to asking women to coddle men's feelings or do even more emotional labor.
Yeah.
Feminism demands accountability, right? How do we balance non-judgment with the need for men to take responsibility?
That is the critical tension here, and the authors are very explicit about this. They draw on thinkers like Sarah Ahmed to emphasize it is absolutely not the responsibility of women who are already navigating oppression to provide endless patience and non-judgmental hand-holding for men who are just starting their journey.
Okay, good. Because that expectation would be deeply unfair.
Totally unfair. It adds yet another burden. So, the nuance is who facilitates these spaces for reflection and learning.
Yeah.
The authors suggest these non-judgmental supportive spaces where men can grapple with these difficult truths and learn without feeling attacked are best created and facilitated by other men, specifically men who are further along in their own feminist understanding and development.
Like a mentorship model.
Exactly. A mentor can guide someone, call out blind spots, share their own mistakes, and offer support from a place of shared experience, understanding the specific psychological hurdles men might face without placing that burden on women.
So it meets the man's need for autonomy learning without reactance, but doesn't exploit women's labor.
That's the idea, a really crucial distinction.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's move to the second pillar. Relatedness. Feeling connected. This seems complicated too.
It is. Relatedness is about feeling connected to and cared for by others, feeling like you belong. For men in feminism, this need is challenged from two directions: connection with other men, their in-group, and connection with feminists, often perceived as an out-group, especially feminist women.
Let's tackle the in-group first, other men. We already talked about the social stigma.
Right. And a big reason that stigma persists is something called pluralistic ignorance.
Pluralistic ignorance. Sounds academic. What does it mean simply?
It means individuals privately reject a particular idea or norm, but they assume, incorrectly, that most other people accept it. So they go along with the norm publicly, reinforcing it even though many people secretly disagree.
Give me a gender example.
Okay, think about the classic scenario. A group of guys, someone makes a casually sexist remark. Maybe several men in the group inwardly think, ugh, that's not okay. But they look around, nobody else says anything, so they assume everyone else is fine with it.
And they stay silent because they don't want to be the odd one out.
Exactly. Especially if they're worried about their own masculinity appearing precarious or fragile. So their silence makes it look like everyone approves of the sexism, even if privately many don't. This massively inhibits men from speaking up or identifying as allies. They think they're alone.
So how do you break that cycle?
You have to challenge the perception. You need to make support for gender equality visible among men. Frame feminism not as something weird or feminine, but as normal, even admirable, and consistent with a healthier, more modern masculinity.
Like those public health campaigns.
Yeah, like Australia's White Ribbon campaign, which positions men protecting women from violence as a masculine strength. And simply exposing men to positive examples, seeing other respected men living feminist values, increases their willingness to identify with the movement. Role models are key here.
Making it seem possible and acceptable within the male group.
Crucial for satisfying that in-group relatedness need.
Okay, now the other side. Relatedness with the out-group. Specifically other feminists. This seems fraught too.
Definitely. A major barrier here is the misandry myth.
The idea that feminists hate men.
Yes. It's a persistent, powerful, and largely false stereotype. But if men believe that feminists inherently dislike them, why on earth would they want to connect with that group? It directly threatens their need for belonging and acceptance.
So what counters that?
Positive contact, real-world interaction. Research shows that when men, particularly heterosexual men, have positive experiences with feminist women when they feel genuinely accepted, listened to, appreciated, their solidarity with the movement increases.
Lived experience trumps the stereotype.
It can, but it's not just about feeling passively accepted, it's also about active collaboration.
Collaboration.
Yes, feeling like you're part of the team. Research on collective action shows that when group members reach consensus on goals, strategies, and priorities, it really boosts feelings of relatedness and helps internalize the group's mission.
So, for men, feeling like they're working with feminists towards mutually agreed upon goals makes them feel more connected and committed.
Exactly. It satisfies that need to belong and contribute meaningfully.
But
Yeah.
we have to come back to that emotional labor point again, especially thinking intersectionally. Women, especially women of color, queer women, disabled women, already carry so much. Expecting them to constantly provide welcoming, validating experiences for men seems problematic.
It absolutely is. And again, the authors are very careful here. They explicitly state that providing this support, acceptance, and positive contact is the woman's choice, never an obligation.
It cannot be demanded.
Cannot be demanded. Given the history and ongoing reality of sexism, women's potential skepticism or caution is entirely valid. The paper talks about this as a kind of two-way street. Men often approach feminist groups with quite low expectations of being welcomed. So often, any positive contact might feel better than anticipated. But that doesn't give men a free pass.
Right.
The onus is on men to act in ways that build trust, to be reliable, consistent, and genuinely committed, rooted in that autonomous motivation we keep talking about. Relatedness, especially across lines of power and privilege, has to be earned through trustworthy action, not assumed or demanded.
Okay. Autonomy. Relatedness. The third pillar is competence. Feeling effective.
Yes. People generally don't stick with things they feel bad at. Men need to feel like their efforts to support feminism actually make a difference. They need a sense of efficacy.
So how do they gain that? What does effective action even look like for a male ally?
Well, sometimes just their presence and voice can have an impact. For instance, in spaces dominated by men, when a man speaks up for gender equality or inclusion, it can powerfully shift group norms and help women feel safer and more included. It signals that equality isn't just a women's issue.
But knowing how and when to do that effectively requires skill, doesn't it? it's not always obvious.
Absolutely not. And that's why vague advice like be an ally isn't very helpful. To build competence, men need concrete, specific guidance.
Like actual training?
Yes. Things like bystander intervention programs are shown to be effective. They don't just talk principles. They use active learning, role-playing, practicing specific phrases and actions for intervening in common situations.
So you actually build the muscle memory for acting.
Exactly. You gain confidence by practicing in a lower-stakes setting. It makes people feel more capable, more competent to act when a real situation arises.
And this competence can't just be generic, right? It needs to be intersectional.
Critically important. This is where we bring in those migrant racial justice, queer theory, and ableism perspectives fully. We have to address intersectional invisibility.
Explain that again for listener.
It's the idea that when we talk about women, the default image that often pops into people's minds is a white, straight, cisgender, non-disabled woman.
A prototype.
Right. Which means the unique experiences and specific forms of sexism faced by women of color, trans women, queer women, disabled women, working class women. They often get overlooked or erased in mainstream conversations about gender equality.
So if a man only learns to recognize sexism as it affects that prototype woman, his competence is incomplete. He won't be effective for all women.
Precisely. Therefore, any training or skill building for male allies must be inclusive training. It has to explicitly highlight how intersecting identities shape women's lives and how sexism manifests differently depending on race, class, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, and so on.
Building competency across the board.
Yes. And this includes trans inclusion. The authors make a point of stressing this. Anti-trans rhetoric, the kind you see from so-called gender-critical groups, or TERFs, is fundamentally based on rigid, essentialist ideas about gender.
The idea that gender is strictly binary and fixed by biology at birth.
Exactly. Which is completely at odds with the feminist goal of dismantling harmful gender hierarchies and stereotypes. True feminist competence means understanding that trans women are women, and supporting their rights and safety is integral to the movement.
Okay, so specific skills, intersectional understanding.
Yeah.
What else builds competence?
Role models again. Feminist men as mentors and role models are huge for competence.
How so?
Seeing other men, especially men you respect, successfully navigate feminist allyship makes it seem achievable. It demonstrates that it's possible to live a feminist life effectively.
But it matters why the role model seems to be doing it, right?
Absolutely critical point, linking back to our core theme. Research suggests people, including men, are much less inspired by leaders or role models they perceive as being motivated by performative reasons, doing it for show, for status, for external validation. That's controlled motivation.
They need to see authenticity,
Yeah.
autonomous motivation.
Yes, we're drawn to sincerity. And those mentors, men who are further along in acting from that authentic place, they can be invaluable. They can provide that non-judgmental space we talked about for learning, help newer allies avoid common pitfalls, share practical strategies. Essentially, they actively build the competence of others.
Through guidance and lived example.
Exactly. It makes the whole process feel less daunting and more achievable.
Okay, this ARC framework, autonomy, relatedness, competence, is really powerful for thinking about the psychology. Now, let's make that explicit connection we've been building towards. How does this apply to our ongoing project, the idea of designing a feminist park,
Right.
a physical space for liberation?
Well, this research basically validates the need for such intentional design. It shows us that typical public spaces, and even many social movement spaces, often inadvertently punish men for trying to engage with feminism.
Through that social stigma, the zero-sum thinking.
Right. The existing environment often undermines ARC for men. So a feminist park needs to be designed from the ground up to actively counter those barriers and intentionally foster autonomy, relatedness, and competence.
Okay, let's take them one by one. How could the park's design support autonomy and relevance?
Well, the park's messaging, its very layout and signage, needs to visibly frame gender equality not just as a women's issue, but as a community issue, something that benefits everyone, including men.
Make that personal relevance unavoidable.
Exactly. Maybe through exhibits, information panels, or even program discussions within the park space that explicitly address the ways patriarchy limits men, the stigma around mental health, restrictive emotional norms, lack of support for caregiving roles.
Connecting back to those points about men's well-being and structural limits like parental leave.
Yes. Making it clear that this space is relevant to their liberation, too. This encourages voluntary engagement, not feeling forced, fostering autonomy.
Okay, what about relatedness and representation in the park's design. How do we build connection?
This is where visual representation becomes key. The park needs to actively combat that femininity stigma and pluralistic ignorance.
So statues and murals.
Could be. Public art, informational displays, maybe programming featuring diverse feminist men, historical figures, contemporary activists, everyday men living these values. Making feminist men visible helps normalize allyship among men. In-group relatedness.
Shows other men that you're not alone. This is something respected men do.
Exactly. And for out-group relatedness, the park's design could incorporate spaces specifically meant for dialogue and consensus building.
Why?
Maybe designated conversation pits, amphitheaters for community forums, shared workshop spaces, places designed to facilitate constructive interaction between different groups within the movement, allowing men to feel part of a collaborative effort, working with feminists on shared goals.
Building that sense of shared purpose.
Yes, satisfying relatedness needs through shared action.
And finally, how does the park design foster competence and skill development, making men feel effective?
The park needs dedicated spaces for learning and practice that feel safe and accessible, not intimidating.
So not just lecture halls.
Definitely not. Think more like community workshop rooms, maybe a dedicated mentorship hub where men can connect with more experienced allies. Perhaps even a designated practice zone, like a small, informal stage or area where people can role-play bystander scenarios or practice difficult conversations in a low-stakes environment.
Borrowing directly from those effective bystander programs. Build the skills safely.
Right. Make gaining competence feel supported, not judged. And crucially, the entire aesthetic and narrative of the park must scream intersectional competence.
What do you mean?
The stories told, the figures celebrated, the issues highlighted, they must visibly and actively center the experiences of multiply marginalized women. Queer women, trans women, women of color, disabled women, working class women.
So it counters that default white woman prototype from the start.
Exactly. The very design signals. Competence here means understanding and fighting sexism in all its interconnected forms. It sets the standard for what effective, inclusive allyship looks like within this space.
Wow. Okay, designing for ARC offers a really concrete way to think about making a space like a feminist park truly effective for engaging everyone, including men.
It moves beyond just hoping people show up to intentionally creating the conditions for sustained, autonomous commitment.
All right, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, we need to touch on limitations and the bigger picture.
Absolutely. First, a really important caveat about the research itself. Most of the studies underpinning SDT and these specific applications have been done in what researchers call weird societies.
Weird.
Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. It means the findings might not automatically apply everywhere. We desperately need more research in diverse cultural, economic, and political contexts to get a truly global understanding of these dynamics.
What works in one place might need adapting elsewhere.
For sure. And the second big point, changing individual men's motivations, while crucial, is only part of the puzzle.
It's not just about individual psychology.
No. Gender inequality is baked into our social structures, our institutions, our cultural norms. Individual change is vital, but we also need systemic, structural interventions to achieve broad, lasting equality.
Can you give an example of a structural change that relates back to ARC?
The parental leave example we touched on earlier is perfect. Think about Sweden's policy reserving a portion of paid parental leave specifically for fathers on a use-it-or-lose-it basis.
So it's not transferable to the mother.
Right. And look how that policy supports ARC. It increases fathers' autonomy by legitimizing and enabling their choice to be deeply involved caregivers. It boosts relatedness both with their children and potentially with other fathers taking leave, normalizing it. And it enhances competence by giving them the dedicated time and opportunity to develop parenting and domestic skills.
So the structure itself encourages the internalization of that caregiving role. It shifts motivation from controlled, maybe feeling obligated, towards autonomous, seeing oneself as a capable, involved parent.
Exactly. It shows how smart policy design can actively cultivate the quality of motivation we need. It's not just about individual aha moments. Structures shape possibilities.
That's a really powerful connection. Okay, let's bring it home. We started by talking about reliability, trustworthiness.
And the core idea is that autonomous motivation is what fuels that reliable, trustworthy allyship. While the research notes it might be genuinely difficult for women to perfectly distinguish a man's inner motives when things are ambiguous.
How do you really know why someone's doing something?
Right. But one thing women are likely to pick up on is inconsistency.
Yeah.
And inconsistency is the calling card of that fragile, controlled motivation. Men who show up sometimes but disappear when it's hard, they're likely to be perceived, probably correctly, as acting performatively.
Which erodes trust.
Completely. So here's the final thought we want to leave you with. If autonomous motivation, that deep internal commitment, is what's required for the sustained effort and trustworthiness that genuine allyship demands.
So the real challenge for men isn't just deciding to start supporting feminism.
No. The deeper challenge is consciously designing their lives and demanding that the spaces they inhabit, like workplaces, communities, maybe even a feminist park, are set up to continually support their autonomy, relatedness, and competence in this work.
So they have the psychological resources to keep going.
Exactly, to never stop. Because true, reliable allyship isn't about one grand gesture. It's about the integrated consistency of a lifelong commitment fueled from within.